Hello and welcome to Moments in History. I'm Linda Shenton Matchett, author, speaker, and history geek. As many of you know, during my research, I often unearth intriguing and little-known facts about World War II that I love to share. Today, I'm going to be talking about the merger that almost was. On May 10, 1940, Germany began a relentless blitzkrieg assault on France that lasted for weeks. And in the midst of that conflict, British and French troops had to be rescued from the beaches of Dunkirk, which was on the western front of France. French resistance was crumbling, and it appeared the Nazis were on the brink of crushing France. Something needed to be done to encourage the country to keep fighting, and just as important, to stop the French naval fleet from falling into German hands. Over lunch, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and French Undersecretary of Defense Charles de Gaulle devised a scheme to unify Britain and France into a single state. I had never heard of this before and wondered if you had too. The plan that emerged was not entirely new. The idea of a United States of Europe had floated around political circles for a few years, but no one seemed to take it seriously. The stroke of a pen was about to turn the impossibility into official policy. Time marched forward, and so did German troops, who entered Paris on June 14th. During the next 48 hours, British and French civil service scribbled madly to draft a proposal for a declaration of Franco-British Union. This was no beefed-up wartime alliance, or a plan for partial integration similar to today's European Union. The goal was to effectively create one country. There would be a joint control of defense, foreign policy, finance, and economic policy. The two parliaments would be united, presumably with French representatives sitting in the House of Commons in London. Every citizen of France would enjoy immediately citizenship of Great Britain, and every British subject would become a citizen of France. The document stated, "At this most fateful moment in the history of the modern world, the governments of the United Kingdom and the French Republic make this declaration of indissoluble union an unyielding resolution in their common defense of justice and freedom against subjection to a system which reduces mankind to a life of robots and slaves." 2 days later, on June 16th, Churchill presented the idea to the all-party British cabinet with the comment that in this crisis we must not let ourselves be accused of a lack of imagination. Surprisingly, the cabinet responded with rousing enthusiasm. Churchill later wrote, "I was somewhat surprised to see the staid, solid, experienced politicians of all parties engage themselves so passionately in an immense design whose implications and consequences were not in any way thought out." Charles de Gaulle, who had arrived that morning in London, had qualms about ending the country of France as he knew it, but he agreed to the plan, saying, "The gesture must be immediate." At 4:30 p.m., he telephoned Paul Renaud, the French Prime Minister, who had fled the advancing Germans, going from Paris to Tours and then Bordeaux. Renaud listened to the proposal with excitement. Salvation for France was in his grasp. Renaud interrupted de Gaulle. "Does he agree to this? Did Churchill give you this personally?" De Gaulle handed the receiver to Churchill, who assured Renaud that he approved. Renaud was transfigured with joy, according to one witness. In order to execute the document, Churchill boarded a train along with leaders of the major parties. The train would travel to the coast, and then the group would sail by ship to an area where they would meet the French government and sign the Act of Union. The train never left the station. Unlike Renaud, other French leaders were less exuberant. The French government became consumed by defeatism, as well as anger at Britain for the perceived abandonment at Dunkirk. Thousands of French had been left behind on the beach, where they were forced to surrender to the Germans. At the 5 p.m. cabinet meeting, many called it a British last-minute plan to steal its colonies and said that being a Nazi province was preferable to becoming a British dominion. Philippe Pétain, a leader in the pro-armistice group called the Union Fusion with a Corpse. Reynaud was stunned with the opposition. He resigned that evening without taking a formal vote on the Union or an armistice, and later called the failure of the Union the greatest disappointment of my political career. Pétain, 84 years old and a great hero of World War I, believed it was his duty to save France from total destruction. He formed a new government that very evening, which immediately decided to ask Germany for armistice terms. After being informed of the French decision, Churchill left the train with a heavy heart. He drove to Downing Street and got back to work. Britain was alone. Thank you so much for stopping by this moment in history. If you have any stories about this British Franco-Union, I would love for you to share them in the comments below, and please keep it clean. If you'd enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss another one. And you can find me across social media at Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time on Moments in History.